Well, welcome in, everyone. You know what time it is. It's Tuesday evening. After further review, Jay Smith, Bradley Kendall. You know who's in the back.
It's AFR time, baby.
Evan McDowell. We got Scout over there running switcher like always. Thanks for tuning in. We got a really a short show tonight, but we're going to be previewing the spring game.
Anything is shorter than last week.
Last week was fun, but it was far too long, so we'll try and keep it concise this week. Bradley, let's dive right into it after further review.
Spring is in the air. We got football season kind of starting, I guess. First game is
it counts.
Going to be underway coming up. It may not count on the scorebook, but it definitely counts on the field. I know Dabo and all the players are super psyched. We had Pat on the rundown last night.
Yep.
He was happy that the last hard practice was in his rearview mirror now. So finally get to get out and see some real football in the field and fill up Death Valley.
Saturday, 2:30. I don't know the exact forecast, but I believe it's supposed to be
see some rain.
Decent. Yeah, maybe overcast, but should be hopefully decent weather. I think they're expecting record crowds. I mean, I would expect to see the whole lower bowl filled. We went last year, and I think they had between 30 and 35,000 people turn out.
Yeah,
for
the year after the championship, it was like 40,000. I think it was 35 last year. Dabo even said in his presser this past week he doesn't want to be the laughingstock of the internet, and I don't anticipate it to. I mean, Clemson's at a time now where everyone expects to be there at the spring game. Everyone's excited to be there. It's not just a practice anymore. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it on Saturday.
Well, we all know what the main topic and point of interest is going to be. It's going to be quarterback
Comes up
play.
every week.
Yep, and I think we're going to see time for all four guys. I think you're going to see everyone get a chance to get in there. Obviously, we would expect Kelly to get out there first. Then you might see Hunter. Then you're going to see, you'll see Chase Bryce at some point.
Yep.
But you're going to see the fellow's name's blanking on me. You've got Trevor Lawrence.
Trevor Lawrence. How do you forget Trevor Lawrence?
It's been a long day.
I thought that was on purpose.
I got three more weeks and then
I thought you were
exams.
joking.
No, I couldn't remember his name for a second. But
That's disappointing.
That's fair.
Just call him Thor.
Better have him as a starter and you disrespect him.
Evan, I don't know. I'll kick it back to you real quick. Where do you think there's not going to be enough attention directed towards a particular position battle this Saturday? What do you feel like people are going to overlook because they're going to be so focused on quarterbacks?
I think that's a good way to phrase that question because I think everybody's going to be overlooking everything but the quarterbacks because they're going to look for number 16 with the long blonde hair flowing out of his helmet, and that's literally all they're going to care about. Despite the fact that weather.com is saying there's a 40% chance of rain on Saturday, but I don't think that's going to stop anybody from coming out. I know it's the first Clemson football game we've had in 4 or 5 months. It's going to be pretty exciting to see them in Death Valley again. But talked a little bit about it on the prowl last night, and I said that the quarterbacks were an especially interesting thing to watch. But Ashley and Amy both pointed out the defensive side of the ball was going to be just as fun to watch, but particularly the defensive backs and, of course, that awesome defensive line that we got all of them coming back that recorded 31 sacks last year. So I think it's going to be really fun to see the Power Rangers back in action, but also we know Venables has been kind of upset throughout spring practice as far as how the defensive backs have been performing and who's going to kind of step up and be that guy this year with several of our safeties and corners of recent years not here anymore. So the uncertainty of the defensive backs and the absolute certainty of the defensive line, I think, will create an interesting dynamic on the side of the ball where the guys don't throw it to each other, which is what everybody's going to be concerned about.
Yeah, I mean, the defensive line, like we've touched on, everybody else in the state has touched on, it's coming back entirely intact. Power Ranger squad's back. I saw there's an Instagram fan page now for the Power Rangers. That was pretty funny. I saw Austin Bryant tweeting about that.
It's like the Legion of Boom in the NFL now in college.
Yeah, and then 6 of the 8 returning starters on defense are in the front 7, which led the country with 46 sacks last season. So like Evan touched on, the front half of that defense is going to be – they're going to play lights out. We should expect that every game. They should be the dominant force. The secondary, I think, is where you're going to see a little bit, like Evan said, you might see people switching around a little bit. I think that the cornerstone, though, of the secondary this season is going to be Trayvon Mullen,
I think
quarterback.
You're right. I would agree. And Isaiah Simmons, don't forget about him either. I think he's going to be definitely a centerpiece of it.
But Trayvon Mullen, 57 tackles last year. I think he had 3 interceptions, 8 pass breakups, and I think he's matured well and is going to be a guy that Venables is going to look at or look to lead the secondary because I don't think Venables is really going to spend much time coaching that front 7.
He's not going to have anything to worry about there. And, usually with all these expectations, you'd think there'd be a lot of pressure involved in that, defensive line to do what they did in the years past. But I think he's pretty confident that they've been there, done that. He knows what he's going to get from them. Maybe start preparing the young guys a little bit. But, these guys are seniors. They can prepare them on their own.
Yeah.
So there's nothing to worry about there. I think the one question I have is coming into this season, not much to worry about in the spring game, but this season, are we going to see much turnovers in the secondary? Because like years past, you have not seen cornerbacks and safeties with a lot of interceptions. Trayvon Mullen, you said before, 3 interceptions was leading the team last year. Is that something we need to be concerned about?
You might see it in the spring game just because you might have guys throwing errant passes.
Yeah.
I mean, I know, Sunshine Scooter Trevor Lawrence has been slinging them in practice, I think, and he's been picked off a few times. But I don't know. I mean, it's not necessarily been a strong suit of Clemson's the last few years. Neither has special teams.
Not at all. Yeah.
But for the most part, it hasn't come back to bite Clemson in the butt.
Thankfully, we've been able to get around it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that they definitely need to continue working on. And it may be a point of emphasis for this season because so many other areas are already covered.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know, Evan. That's an interesting question. What do you think on that front?
As far as, I'm sorry, I kind of blanked. I was looking up the Clemson roster.
We got two people blanking tonight.
Yeah, no.
I'm the only last man standing.
I was looking up the Clemson roster to see some other position battles and who's going to kind of step up and be a leader this year. So I guess I'll kind of go off topic. But looking at the wide receivers, we have 14 wide receivers on the roster. I know we think, we lost our top two guys from last year, with Dion not here anymore, obviously, and the other guy's name
Ray.
Yeah. Ray also not here, although he's still technically on the roster.
Did they still have listed as a cornerback on there?
Yeah, they got wide receiver / cornerback here for Ray. But still got Travion Thompson and DeAndre Overton, names we're familiar with. Obviously, Hunter Renfro's still here. But T. Higgins and Amari Rodgers, who we saw last year, show some flashes of brilliance. TJ Chase, Cornell Powell, part of that rotation as well. And then a lot of these backup guys. But I think it'll be real interesting to see who kind of steps up to be that guy. And, Clemson has a short history of being known as wide receiver with Sammy Watkins, DeAndre Hopkins, Martavis Bryant, a lot of those guys who are seeing a lot of success in the NFL. And so we kind of expect Deion Kane to be a pretty good NFL wide receiver as well. And a lot of us kind of don't know what Ray's doing entering the draft this year anyway, but we wish him the best nonetheless. So it'll be interesting to see who's going to be Kelly Bryant's go-to guy or whoever the starting quarterback is at any point during the season. Who's going to be the number one go-to guy? Because we know it's not going to be Hunter Renfro. He's a slot guy.
And that's what I was going to bring up was Hunter's been a third down wide receiver pretty much his entire career.
Right. Consistency. But as far as the number one overall wide receiver, when the defense for whoever we're playing that week, let's say Texas A&M, since it's week 1, when they're scheming to cover our wide receivers, they're going to put their best corner on whom? Amari? T, you could argue, was the best out of those two last year. He might have been the third most talented, maybe even the second most talented wide receiver on our roster, and the only thing holding him back was lack of experience.
I feel like DeAndre had some good plays.
There's no doubt that DeAndre and even Travion Thompson and Cornell Powell and TJ Chase, maybe you don't hear their names as much, but there are a couple of times where you see Cornell Powell run a really good route and make a really good catch. So
and they know the system too.
No,
absolutely.
And what I was getting
at
is
huge.
Well, what I think what could be a very interesting dynamic is if you see the quarterbacks come out and Trevor's got a go-to guy, Hunter's got a go-to guy, Kelly's got a go-to guy, and then this is all theoretical, but if Clemson decided to go with some sort of dual quarterback system, well then if you're a defense and you get out there and it's okay, who is Kelly's number one guy to go to? If you have different quarterbacks picking different receivers to choose, and we know Hunter Renfro is reliable, I would expect him to be starting in every game this season. However, you've got guys like T, Amari, DeAndre, Travion, that all could be pretty interchangeable.
And I think that could definitely be a focal point. It's going to really come down to which quarterback, kind of what their strong suits are. You're going to see Trevor Lawrence try to air it out. You're going to see maybe Hunter Johnson or one of the younger guys trying to depend on Hunter Renfro because they know that he's a safety blanket, and they know he can make them look good. Kelly's probably not going to air it out too much. Dabo did say that Amari Rodgers has looked the best out of all the wide receivers so far this offseason.
Jeff Scott had the same thing.
Yeah, so the coaching staff is in love with him. T. Higgins is obviously that tall threat.
You know what we're not naming? You know what position we have not talked about?
Tight end.
And that's been something that Clemson has had recently that has given them a lot of success. You got guys like Jordan Leggett. It all started with Dwayne Allen.
Yep.
I mean, that's
a little
position
bit tapered off last year with Mylan Richard. He didn't play as much.
But it's still something that has served Clemson extremely well on offense in the past.
All right, so do you expect Mylan Richard to have, let's not call it a breakout year, but a much better year than he did last year? I mean, obviously it was kind of hard to be a part of that receiving core and have so much talent and still have Kelly Bryant need to spread the ball out. But do you think Mylan Richard is the go-to guy, or do you see potentially a Cannon Smith, I know, popped in at times, caught his first touchdown last year. Hunter Renfro's brother Cole, also a tight end on the roster. J.C. Chalk, Shadell Bell, Ryan Ennis, DJ Green. Well, not DJ Greenlee. I
think he's going to need to have a bit of a breakout year. I don't think you can just rely on Hunter Renfro for your third and long. You've got to have another target or someone else out there.
Especially without like that breakout, already well-known star wide receiver. I mean, there's a lot of good guys, a lot of above-average guys, but when you can stretch the field like that with a tight end, I mean, you saw the benefits, that we're reaping with Deshaun when he had, I'm blanking on his name right now, whoever our tight end was freshman year. Who was it?
Our freshman
year. I mean, who was our tight end?
Dwayne Allen, was it?
No, Dwayne Allen was a
that
while
was Todd
ago.
Boyd. Hold on.
Stanton Secondier's popping in my mind, but
Stanton Seconder was on the roster, but he wasn't the go-to guy. Would that have been 20?
Was he a tight end? Stanton Seconder was a tight end?
Yeah, he was. He was from I believe it was Isle of Palms or Charlotte.
Was it
Not
Leggett?
Charlotte, Charleston.
Was it Leggett?
I think it was Jordan Leggett.
Yes.
It was Jordan Leggett.
Well, here's our 2015 roster.
See, we're all
Jordan
blanking
Leggett.
tonight. It has been a long week.
We can't remember
just
things right now.
Tuesday.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got Seconder.
That's why we
Mylan
have these in
Richard
front of us.
actually on the roster. J.J. McCullough, I don't know if you remember.
It was Jordan Leggett.
Yeah, it was
Leggett.
Jordan Leggett. But you're right. Stanton Seconder was part of that mix. I know I heard his name called a couple of times, but other than those two.
And we always felt like Jordan Leggett really didn't live up to expectations and
potential,
didn't quite perform, like you said, but I kind of said the same thing about Deion Kane. I never really felt like Deion Kane quite blossomed.
I think because he had Mike Williams'
everything.
shadow that he was living up to right there.
You still saw Nuke Hopkins and Sammy Watkins both become superstar athletes in their own right at the same school. They both tried to outshine each other every game. I mean, for every Nuke Hopkins highlight, there was a Sammy Watkins highlight.
I mean, I'd even argue that Deion came farther than we thought he was going to. After what happened
Fair. That's
our
totally
sophomore
fair.
year, I mean, coming into last year, from where he was, I think he did pretty well. He may not have exceeded expectations, but he definitely was a formidable one wide receiver. So, but yeah, you mentioned special teams before. That's one thing I also wanted to touch on. It's going to be a big question mark. I mean, we saw Alex Spence kind of come into his own towards the end of the year last year. Kicked a lot better towards the better half of the season. Will Spires is, what's he going to be? The punting game. I know we just locked up the #1 punter and kicker recruits coming up for, I guess, was it the next year or the year after that? I don't remember.
It might
exactly.
be this next year.
Might be this year. So that'll be interesting. Hugo, I saw, was kicking recently. He might not be at full form coming up soon, but it'll take him a little while. But yeah, I mean, it didn't really come back to get us much last year, but it's definitely not something that we want to have a question mark going into this season.
Yeah,
Special team-wise. Yeah.
That's fair. No, I mean, again, it's not an area that Clemson's well known for.
Yeah.
It's not something that we're excel at. But at the same time, we've limited our mistakes there, and we haven't had it bite us in the butt yet. So I mean, I think what's interesting, or an interesting dynamic to look at for this incoming season, is the fact that last year we were preseason top 5. And we weren't really expected to win we weren't expected to win the division.
I didn't pick him to win the conference.
We didn't, I mean, a lot of people, myself included, just felt like 3 years college football playoff is just improbable. There's just no way.
New quarterback.
There's just too many variables for Clemson to get back. And they got a 12-win season.
Yeah.
Kelly Bryant got 12 wins, most, I believe, all time for a first-year Clemson starter.
It's impressive.
Now, it's extremely impressive. Now, Clemson is more than likely, reading from what I've looked at today and in the last few weeks, they're expected to be #1, if not very, very close. They're going to be top 5. They're going to be top 5 preseason.
Top 2, probably so.
Could easily be #1 preseason. Yeah. And I think the expectation this year is different than it was last year. Last year, everyone was like, Clemson, it's a bit of a change. They're changing. They're in a I don't want to call it a building year.
It would be excusable not to perform as we did our freshman
Right. People
sophomore
weren't
year.
giving Clemson a lot of credit in terms of making a deep run in the playoff. I think this year, all the pressure's on Clemson.
I think you're right. With what we see in the other teams in the ACC, I mean, Clemson is basically the
It's
top
become
heavy
the front runner
holding
of
the
the
conference right now
Right.
in his chances to make the playoffs.
So it's going to be interesting to see who Dabo chooses to handle that pressure. And that's why I feel like he's going to go with a guy like Kelly, maybe longer than he really should in other games. Like if there comes a point where you just need to sub in the next guy, Dabo may not quite do that because he wants Kelly to have as much experience as possible because he feels comfortable with Kelly managing bigger moments.
I think he knows what he's going to get out of Kelly. He's going to get a guy that manages the game. Doesn't show. He might show signs of flashiness throughout the game, but it's not going to be that take over kind of mentality that Deshaun Watson
He didn't make poor decisions last year.
That was
he
huge.
did not make many poor. I mean, there were not that many turnovers. I felt like Kelly turned the ball over fewer times, and Evan, you may be able to check on this. I felt like Kelly turned the ball over much fewer times than Deshaun did.
Well, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Deshaun led the conference in interceptions.
Yeah.
That 1 year. Yeah. So I mean, that's clear.
And we still won a national championship.
Yeah, which is impressive enough. Yeah.
You want to know something that, and we haven't talked about it because it doesn't really pertain to the spring game because these guys aren't on campus yet. But if we're going to go ahead and preview the fall and position battles and these units within the defensive side of the ball or even the offensive side of the ball, how about some names that we hadn't thrown out yet? Xavier Thomas, KJ Henry, Justin Ross, Mario Goodrich, all these other guys that we just recruited. Like, we talk about Trevor Lawrence, and that's easy because he's, the most notable out of all of those, and he's already here on campus. But some of these other guys who we won't see in the spring game, I think we're going to be equally as excited to watch them in their maybe even limited action the first week of the year, and definitely we'll see them hopefully against Furman week 2. But like Xavier Thomas and KJ Henry on the defensive side of the ball, I think further strengthens our defensive line. And then Justin Ross, I know we were talking about wide receivers just a minute ago, and so this is kind of a little bit late to the conversation, but 6'4", 200 pounds. I know he's going to be a lot of raw material coming out of high school, but the #1 overall recruit in the state of Alabama, snagging him from right under Auburn and Alabama's wings, like, that's a huge steal for us. And he's going to be, I think, a really talented wide receiver. So you could even see him step on campus maybe even in the summer and kind of maybe not take over the position battle by storm, but there's definitely a lot of potential out of Justin Ross to see him emerge as, hey, maybe this could be a potential go-to guy. Not this year, maybe not even next year, but he's got the size, he's got the hands, and he's got the talent that Nuke Hopkins, Sammy Watkins, Mike Williams, Deion Kane, all of those guys.
That's high praise.
Ooh,
that's
big shoes to fill
high.
right there, yeah.
I don't
there
disagree.
with other young guns, Amari Rogers, T. Higgins, like, you're going to see an embarrassment of riches as far as wide receivers and even across the board. Dabo's just got so many recruits and players that he can plug in to different scenarios that, we're kind of spoiled of how good we've got it right now. But you throw Justin Ross into that wide receiver conversation, throw Xavier Thomas, KJ Henry into that defensive side of the ball, and you got a completely different looking offense and defense.
Which is amazing because,
yeah.
I feel like the mantra around Clemson is that we under-recruit in terms of quantity. I mean, looking at the recruiting boards, we're always towards the bottom in terms of number of
numbers, not
recruits.
quality, but in terms of quantity.
Quality,
yes.
we're for sure up there. I think depth is huge. I mean, you can have the top level guys that really carry the load, and the guys that are going to get all the praise, but that depth is huge, especially late in the season when we're starting to place the back end of the ACC schedule, and guys are going to be tired. You're going to need those guys to step up. I mean, even I know it's a little off topic, the Golden State Warriors. Best team in the country, their bench is always what basically wins them championships. So it's going to be good to watch. I think Xavier Thomas might not get as much playing time as maybe somebody like KJ Henry. We'll see. I have no idea. But wide receiver, I think, is definitely going to be something we're going to see a lot of guys filling in roles a lot.
Well, and even you could see, and just as far as Xavier Thomas and KJ Henry are concerned, they play on opposite sides of the line. You've got Thomas on the strong side, KJ Henry's a weak side defensive end. So you could see the two of them bookending that defensive line, for when we need to have those substitutions, because I know the defense, we do like to try to sub out as much as we can to keep guys fresh, which I think is part of the reason that our defensive line is so good, is because they're well acclimated to that system. But, I mean, if you need to pull out, a Christian Wilkins or an Austin Bryant and just plug in Xavier Thomas, KJ Henry for a couple of plays, other than the lack of experience, you're not losing any physical abilities. Like Xavier Thomas, 6'3", 260, KJ Henry, 6'5", 235. Like, those are big, strong, fast guys that are only going to get better throughout the summer and early fall once they arrive here on campus. So if you can get them to the level, or maybe not the level that Christian Wilkins and these other guys are at, but if you can get them to a level where you plug them in for a play or two and you don't lose anything.
Or a drive. It may not just be a play or two. It could just be a drive.
Yeah.
They may say, hey, it's late in the fourth quarter. We've got this game on lock. We got a substantial lead.
Yeah.
Put these guys in for a drive or two drives and just see how they do. I think that's a really good testing ground for those kinds of guys.
And especially that Furman game, week 2.
Yeah.
Early on, you're going to see a lot of that.
No,
for
yeah,
sure.
absolutely.
I think
you could potentially see Xavier Thomas and KJ Henry play the entire second half of the Furman game. You could see Trevor Lawrence potentially play most of the second half of that Furman game. That's really going to be, as excited as we are for the spring game to see these guys, some of these guys for the first time, I think that Furman game is really when we're going to be able to see these guys in a real game speed environment, at a real full stadium, and actually see them do their real thing. Obviously, nobody's going to be going too hard in the spring game. We don't want anybody to get hurt, but the first time you're going to see these guys on full display ought to be the second, third quarter of the Furman game on into the rest of that game. So the third and fourth quarter of the Furman game, if you would normally leave, that's when you would want to stick around to watch these young guys and see how they do against actual college talent at this level, at this game speed.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely easy to talk about sticking around for 4 quarters in that August heat from within the air-conditioned studio until you get out there and it feels like it's 100 degrees and those bleachers and you're baking. Yeah. But no, it is. I think that those games,
Are you proposing we need a dome on Death Valley?
I'm proposing we need those little squirt fans that blow water vapor. Yeah. All I'm saying is that I think we've kind of harped on the schedule and how weak it is, the home schedule at least this year. But as we've talked about, I think it can also serve another purpose with allowing those guys to get experience. And, if we just if fans happen to hang around and watch, because some inevitably will. I mean, the stadium's not going to just completely get up and leave at the end of the third quarter or halftime if it's a blowout. They'll be able to watch those games or watch those players go into the games.
Yeah.
Right, and there will actually be something to look for. So it'll be interesting.
It'd be interesting. I think a great comparison, just while you were talking, the first thing that popped in my head was Shaq Lawson and Austin Bryant, our freshman year. Shaq played, ACC Defensive Player of the Year, played the entire year. But you saw Austin Bryant mix in throughout the season, and then when it came to the Orange Bowl,
the other defensive lineman,
the Orange Bowl comes in and fills in and plays that in the national championship game, and it's like Shaq wasn't even there, So I think that's going to be huge. Like I said before, these guys are seniors; they've been there a long time. They know how to teach these guys what to do. So it's like you said, an embarrassment of riches. It's a great thing to have and reason to stick around the spring game.
It's definitely. Clemson football I think is honestly in a better place now than they were when Deshaun was coming back for their senior year, because they basically, barring heaven forbid, an injury on the defensive line, they pretty much have that locked down. And I feel like even though I'm reading this article about how Venables made, and I did know that Venables made the team or the defense run after practice, multiple times. After the offense came off the field, and how he was talking about how he wanted, the leaders to step up, and Austin Bryant was saying that's on the, him and the other guys that are seniors, take responsibility and stuff. But I feel like Clemson's not going to have too much to worry about on defense this season. No. I think they're going to have a little bit of time to figure out the offense, where quarterbacks, which situations suit which players best, who they want as the number 2, number 3, number 4 wide receivers. Is there going to be a tight end that comes out of the shadows and all of a sudden starts making an impact? What is special teams going to look like? Yeah. Well, Clemson has games where they can take time to answer those questions.
Which is great to see. I know the schedule's going to be easy early on, but once you start, going through the schedule a little bit, it's great to see that we'll have the defense as kind of a, not a liability. We'll give the offense time to, work things out, figure things out, what they're going to do. So the defense, that'll be a nice little safety blanket to lean on and not put so much pressure on Jeff Scott and the rest of the offense, which I think is huge.
Under Brent Venables jumping higher than he's going to jump up in the air during the spring game at some point. But what are we going to go 4 foot, 5 foot?
How about over under 10 pullbacks by the pullback guy during the spring
over?
Game? I think 30. Brent's going to treat this like the national championship.
Brent's going to be out there next to the hashes
because he's been holding all this in.
I'll take the under. I'll take the under on both of those. I'll take the unpopular opinion that he realizes this is a spring game. Maybe he's had a lot of frustration in practice. Doesn't want to show it off to the general public, so that way we all don't freak out about how bad the defense is going to be. Even though I think we all know, and Brent Venables even knows that. As long as the defensive line, like you said, stays healthy, I think the rest of the defense is just going to kind of fall into place.
Easy for you to say, but he's been calling them average the entire offseason.
I'm looking at every article that's been written about the defense.
He is never happy. Venables, has Venables ever been satisfied? You could have asked him the night after we won, or a couple hours after we won the national championship 2 years ago.
I want another one.
Hey, yeah. You could have said, hey, what went wrong? And he could have sat down with you for however long you had and told you just all the things the defense did wrong.
He's got 9 more fingers to put rings on.
I get that point, but I think there's a difference when you nitpick a national championship game or a game that you lost in the regular season versus calling, I don't think, it's unequivocally the best starting front 4 on defense in Clemson football history.
In the
He's
nation,
calling them arguably
history.
college history. At least they are the best starting defensive line in the nation this year, by far. That is consensus.
That's a long shot.
And for Venables to sit here and basically blast him after every practice and call him average, he's a passionate guy.
I think that's what you have to do.
You got to understand that's Venables adding fuel to the fire. He says they're average, but look at who we've got returning in addition to some of these young guys. You've got Trayvon Mullen, A.J. Terrell, Mark Fields, Isaiah Simmons. They all played pretty well last year when they were healthy. They weren't, Darrelle Revis shut down corners, anything like that, but they can make the play in space. They can make good tackles, and they play fundamental football because that's what Venables teaches them. So I think that is Venables' way of maybe motivating them to be better, and that's probably also his way of stirring the pot and saying, we might not be as good as we have been in recent memory, but that's still a pretty damn good defense, all things considered. yeah, obviously the secondary is going to be our weakness, and for that matter, what are we going to do at linebacker with Dorian O'Daniel gone, Ben Boulware 2 years removed? Like, we've had some good middle linebackers.
You got
recent
Skalski
years.
now. I feel like Skalski's a pretty suitable replacement. I don't feel like, he's not shown potential. I mean, what do who do you feel like is going to take over for linebacker? I mean, I feel like Skalski would be an obvious choice.
I would go Skalski. What position is Tanner Muse again? Tanner Muse is
I think he's technically listed as a
technically
linebacker.
linebacker. I know he's been listed at like multiple options.
Yeah.
I think he could be huge. He's not going to play in the spring game. He's injured right now, but I think he could be good because we saw him a good bit last year.
Yeah.
Even when he was hurt, we depended on him a lot early on in the season. So I think he could be huge too. But yeah, like Evan, you were saying, I really think Venables, while he knows that we're
Trey Lamar.
Trey Lamar, yeah,
Lamar.
that's also a good
Okay,
one.
that's
Yeah.
a good one.
Like Skalski, sure. You've got Trey Lamar. You've also got Balin Spector, a young guy coming in.
I hadn't heard of him yet. I hadn't heard of
Kendall
him.
Joseph, I know, is in the
Yep.
draft. I don't know if either of the Davis brothers are coming back, JD and Judah.
I believe they're still here.
I think they're both still here, but we saw both of them play. I think Judah was the one that played more often, but he was pretty. Connor Sakis, it says he's a senior. He might have graduated. Chad
Okay,
Smith,
so-
redshirt sophomore. So like, there's potential here, but I think Trey Lamar is the guy you're going to be looking at, and if, like we said, the Davis brothers are still here, look for them to step up. But yeah, Skalski could also have a lot of potential and a lot of impact. So we're not quite as worried about the linebackers as we are the defensive backs, but I think we can agree there's still some amount of concern there. I think as Clemson fans everywhere, we're sold that, okay, we have the best defensive line in the country, probably the best we have ever had, maybe the best we ever will have. And so we kind of write off the rest of that defense that, we'll be able to get to the running back or we'll be able to get to the quarterback before the linebackers and the secondary even matters. But the fact of the matter is we are going to need linebackers and defensive backs. And one could argue that outside of Trey Lamar and Shaq Smith and Balin Spector, these young guys, you could argue that the linebacker position is almost as concerning as the defensive backs because they're
I think you're
potentially
100% right.
I don't think that's a stretch. I mean, I think it's probably more planned out than we are. We realize, and we've talked about it for only a few minutes. Venables has been spending months coming up with a game plan for who he has for linebacker. I think, like we talked about, both the offense and the defense have different questions that they need answers to, and the spring game will kind of be a way to get there, or at least kind of get an idea. But there's certain areas, certain positions that are pretty much online. And it's funny, we talked about tight ends earlier in the show. I didn't realize
Cole
Renfro, Hunter's brother, actually is a walk-on tight end.
I told you
I haven't
that.
said that.
I read his name off the
Well,
rip.
hey, you weren't listening to us once. He wasn't listening to you once, so you guys are pretty much even at this
I
point.
guess.
So.
I didn't. Yeah,
I'm the only
I
one that
didn't
came
hear-
prepared
I
for
didn't-
this show, guys.
I didn't hear you mention his name earlier. I didn't realize though that he was because he's a redshirt freshman, so this is his. It'll be his incoming freshman year, I guess.
Yeah, he was hurt last year, so yeah.
Yeah, I didn't realize that he was. So maybe he'll. I mean, how many people thought Hunter Renfro was going to turn into what he turned
No
into?
one. That's why.
No one.
That's why he's
so
a
all
walk-on.
I'm saying
Nobody
is Cole
Cole
recruited
probably would
Renfro.
have a position on the team.
Well, it
if
wasn't
he's
just
in
Clemson
Wisconsin.
that
listen,
didn't think anything
he's
of Hunter
a
Renfro. It was
walk-on just like his
everybody.
brother.
Yeah. What's up, Evan?
I said it wasn't just Clemson that didn't have high hopes for Hunter Renfro. It was literally everybody else in the nation. That's
Yeah.
why he didn't have a college offer. That's why he had to walk on here, and that's why you never see any Hunter Renfro high school
Mixtapes, yeah, exactly.
Because he was nothing, and nobody expected him to be anything, and now he's the guy.
Oh, so he did play last year in one game against Kent State, but then he suffered a
was
torn
hurt.
ACL in
Yeah.
practice. So this is going to be his second year.
Well, I guess
because he used a year of eligibility.
did he really for
Well,
one game?
if you played against Kent State, then then that's your
That's
eligibility.
unfortunate. I know basketball, you can play like a certain amount, and then
Yeah,
if you
I'm
don't
pretty
reach
sure that
cutoff,
counts
you
as
can count
a
it.
year of eligibility. I don't know. I mean, I think, like I said, there's a lot to look for in the because kind of trying to wrap up. I think there's a lot to look for in the spring game, and there will definitely be some questions that'll linger after the spring game. We really won't know the answers to the quarterback questions until 3 or 4 games into the season. I feel like.
Real quick, outside of quarterback, what's one thing you're looking for in the spring game, Evan?
Outside of quarterback, looking forward to the spring game.
Position, just one specific thing.
You're on the clock. You're on the clock.
One specific position or one specific guy or
Anything. One specific of something.
Anything.
I don't know. That's a tough one. I wasn't prepared to answer this question. Actually, I was in the middle of, and this probably doesn't answer your question, but this is my way of dodging it.
No,
right
it
now.
probably
I
won't.
feel like it's not going to answer the
No,
question. The
I was in the
Jeopardy
middle-
music is concluding. It's over.
I was in the middle of actually Googling Richard Yeargin, who was,
Yes.
I'm sure you remember,
Uh-huh.
a really good defensive lineman, car crash last summer, missed all of the 2017 season, and I was trying to find an update on whether we think, obviously probably not the spring game, but if we think he's going to play at all in the fall, because I remember the 2016 season, hearing his name called a couple of times as being one of those guys that rotates on that defensive line and having an impact up front. So the potential for possibly him to be around in the fall is nice as well. But outside of the quarterbacks and that position battle, I guess the one thing I'm most looking forward to for the spring game, I'm going to go with the defensive backs. I wouldn't say I'm looking forward to it, but I'm interested to see how that plays out. I mean, we're going to see all 4 quarterbacks. Let's see what they make our defensive backs look like, because
that's
good.
an
We can-
interesting.
I like that.
I
we can
think
put a
quarterbacks is
positive
the
or a
obvious
negative
choice.
spin on whatever happens with those guys. Like if
Yeah.
Trevor Lawrence goes 0 for 5 with 2 interceptions, we could say, dang, he's really overrated. Or we could say, hey, maybe our defensive backs are really, really good. So
It depends on Dabo's reaction when he comes off the field.
Oh,
Is
yeah.
Dabo going to be screaming at him, or he's going to be like,
He'll be
"Son,
screaming at
what were you?
somebody.
What are you looking at down
I really
there?"
wish we could get him mic'd up. I
No,
really wish we could.
I think it'll be a lot of fun. Like I said, spring game this Saturday, 2:30.
what's the one thing y'all are
yeah,
looking forward to then?
you
Let me
gotta
put
answer
you
the
back
question.
on the
I mean,
spot.
it's probably pretty
quarterback.
obvious. It's going to
Cannot
have
be
to be quarterbacks.
Cannot be quarterback.
Can't be quarterbacks.
I mean, we've basically
My answer
touched
couldn't
on
be quarterbacks.
everything.
Yours can't either.
It's time to wrap the show.
Mine is
Don't
Amari
dodge the
Rodgers.
question,
It's
Jason.
Amari and T. Higgins. I want to see which one steps up as the number 1 guy.
I think wide receivers could be interesting.
Oh,
Yeah.
just use
Say
my
something
idea.
different. Say something different, Jay.
Could
I
be.
want to see you think.
Just cut it off. He's not viable anymore.
Fade to black, I guess. Jeez.
All right, it's been a lot of fun bringing you this edition of After Pro Review. Like I said, catch the spring game this Saturday at 2:30. Much thanks in the back to Scout, as always, helping with behind-the-scenes stuff.
I don't block her out, Evan.
Evan-
Give her some screen time. There you go.
I didn't
Doing
realize
his
I was
thing
blocking
back
her,
there.
sorry. Are
For
we
Bradley
recapping
Kendall,
spring game next week?
I'm Jay
What?
Smith.
We recapping spring game next week, hopefully.
We'll see. We'll see
All
how
right,
it
we'll
goes.
see. Stay tuned.
For Bradley Kendall, I'm Jay Smith. This has been After Further Review.
Thanks for watching.